Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Abby, and I am here to give you a quick tip video of all of the camera equipment that I use for my reselling business. So I've been reselling off and on for probably about 2 years. It's been my full-time job, it's been a part-time job, it's been a hobby type of thing ever since probably about 2015. And I have gone through a lot of different camera equipment and a lot of different photo setups, and I just wanted to give you some tips on some things that I find to be worth buying when you think you should upgrade to new equipment. So I have done one other video on how to quickly edit your photos for Poshmark and eBay. I primarily sell on Poshmark, so for me that's what I usually talk in the context of, where things like having a super clear white background isn't really going to be the #1 priority. I do a lot of my photography for Poshmark as like a creative kind of outlet for me. So this might not apply to everybody, but I wanted to give some just some information on the things that I use, things I've used in the past, and what I think is worth purchasing and when I think it's worth purchasing new items. Also, side note that this video might be going between 2 different video formats because some I'll be filming on my iPhone, so I can show you what camera I'm using. I'll preface this with saying that I really don't think that having a super nice camera is going to necessarily translate to better sales. I don't think having an expensive lighting setup is going to translate to better sales. And there's a lot of things that I think get kind of pushed for you to purchase or for you to think you need, where you really don't need a whole lot to take really good photos for reselling clothes. I've done this throughout the 5 years that I've been doing it, and I've just been slowly buying new things, and I've slowly been looking at what works for me and what doesn't. And these are the things that I use as daily, and there's some things that I've purchased that I ended up regretting purchasing, so I'll be going through those things as well. So the first thing that I want to talk about for camera, which is the most important thing, is the camera that you use. So I used to use my iPhone for a majority of my photos all the way up until about 2 years ago probably. Photography is something that I've always been kind of into. I enjoy taking photos of things. It's always been sort of like a side hobby, not really as a business or trying to make money, but I do really enjoy taking photos, especially of clothes or fashion. So I've always had a more expensive camera, but it wasn't necessarily purchased for reselling. And a long time, even with having I had a DSLR camera for a really long time, and I still just preferred to use my iPhone. I didn't feel like the pictures were necessarily worth all that different, and I didn't feel like the hassle of transferring my photos over onto my computer was really worth it when I was doing all of my work on my phone at first. But as I started to list more items and my business started to grow, and I started to have, I started to take photos of maybe anywhere between like 40 to 75 items at one time, having a camera that is not your phone is a lot quicker. I have found that once you get to a point where you are starting to photograph probably any more than 40 to 80 items at a time, I really suggest using a separate camera. One, it's because it doesn't bog down your phone as much. Having a lot of photos stored on your phone can take a lot of space. It really helps with like phone battery and all of that extra stuff, and then also being able to batch work on your computer is a lot quicker than batch working on your phone. You could even still use your phone, but I would still suggest to upload those photos to your computer and listing on your computer after that. So using an iPhone is definitely 100% totally okay. I know that there's people that have way bigger Poshmark closets than I do that still just use their iPhone to take their photos. I would suggest, if you are starting to make more money and you're starting to grow, to try and continue to have like a higher quality iPhone camera. because I've noticed that after I have an iPhone for probably about a year or so, the camera quality starts to drastically drop. I want to talk about what camera that I currently use, and that's the camera that I'm filming on right now. I use a Sony A6300, I believe. Yeah, it's a Sony A6300. I bought it about 2 years ago. I didn't buy it specifically for reselling. I actually bought it for other projects, but ever since I owned it already, I just figured I would keep using it. What I really like about this camera, and I would really suggest that, like, if you are looking into investing in a camera, I would highly suggest looking into a camera that is Bluetooth compatible, can hook up to your internet, and is a mirrorless camera. I wouldn't necessarily suggest a DSLR or a heavier weight camera with heavy lenses, because one is those batteries tend to die out really. The battery will die pretty quickly unless you get an extension battery for it. And then also just the sheer size. If you're holding up a camera for long periods of time, your arms get sick and tired, and having a really lightweight mirrorless camera, or even just a more inexpensive digital camera, would work just as well. And one of my favorite things about this camera is if you are modeling your own listings, what's so nice about it is that you can get the Sony app on your phone and you can hook up to your camera and it'll show you exactly what your camera is seeing on your phone. So you can see everything on there and you can take photos, so you're not having to buy a separate clicker. You can just use your phone, so you're not having to buy extra equipment. The first thing that I would suggest to upgrade is probably your lighting. I prefer like natural light. We all do. If we all could have perfect natural light 24/7, we would all choose that. But the problem is that especially a lot of resellers, a lot of you all have kids, we don't have time, you have day jobs, and it's hard to get those perfect daylight photos. So I would suggest upgrading to a cheap lighting system. I use a set of two newer box light sets, a little bit oversized and sort of big, so I wouldn't even necessarily suggest getting those, and I believe that it was about $70 on Amazon. Now, I bought that one when I was living in my old apartment and I had a lot more space. These box lights take up a lot of space, and unless you want to take them down and put them away after every use, which is not easy, it takes a lot of time to unscrew everything and put them away, so I usually just leave them set up. They do end up taking a lot of space, so if you don't have a designated area just to leave all your photo equipment, I wouldn't really suggest getting one of those. What I would suggest getting is like an inexpensive ring light, because those can generally do just about the same amount of work, especially if you're not trying to have like a full perfectly lit photo setup. I think getting just a regular ring light for your photos is perfectly fine, especially if you're just taking your photos on the ground or you're taking them on a wall. Perfectly fine. Another really cheap lighting trick that I did way back in the day when I first started is I went to Home Depot, and I think I can find an article of how I did this at first, but if I find an article or tutorial on how to do this, I'll link it below. But what I did was I went to Home Depot, and you can buy chicken lamps. So basically things that people buy to incubate chicken eggs. You can buy the lamps, and they don't come with anything. They're just aluminum lamps with a plug. They're super cheap, maybe like $5 to $6 a lamp. And then you go and you buy a daylight bulb and put that in there, and then you buy parchment paper, and you can put the parchment paper over the lamp. You can just glue it. I just taped them. It was really cheap option, and so you're also getting like that flooded, like the box light look. Yeah, I am always trying to change up my photo system. I constantly get bored with what I have, so I try not to invest in anything super expensive. And one of my biggest regrets was buying a backdrop. So about 2 or 3 years ago, I spent about $150. Don't ask me why I spent that much money on this. I bought a big, bulky, oversized backdrop that was so expensive, and honestly, it's not even that well made. I bought them off of Amazon, And basically it comes with two tall rod tripod type of things, a rod that goes on top, and then it usually comes with a cloth backdrop. The reason why I wouldn't really suggest this is, one, the cloth backdrop gets dirty so easily, so you're going to constantly be having to wash it. Setup in and of itself is so time consuming that unless you have a specific spot where you're able to keep all of your photo stuff set up all the time, I wouldn't suggest it at all. What I would suggest doing is just buying a peel and stick wallpaper and putting it on the area that you want to take your photos. And then if you get sick of it, you can just pull it off and re-put it up. But I would suggest buying a really simple gray, or really just like maybe a marble print or something like that. Making it as a backdrop, that's a lot easier, it takes up a lot less space, and it lasts a lot longer so you're not having to constantly take down the cloth and get it washed or get it cleaned. It's always going to be there. It's a lot easier to repair. That would be my specific suggestion. And I'll post a picture, some photo examples of when I had that backdrop. I really enjoyed using that backdrop. It made my life a lot easier in the long run. So that's a really good option for a backdrop. Another thing that I like to use for a backdrop, and I would use these specifically for my men's clothes, is these. So I went to Home Depot probably about a year ago, and I bought these pegboards. They're probably about $5 a board, and these are about probably 3 or 2.5 feet wide and maybe 4 feet tall. Yeah, probably about 4 feet tall. And then I also bought a set of pegboard pegs off of Amazon, and that's actually a really easy, simple backdrop, and it kind of looks cool. If you are really good at decorating and you have like a nice organized house or in a room with good lighting, I would suggest just standing in front of your own. I'll share some photos that I've been using recently in my living room. My husband is really good at decorating our house and making it look very aesthetically pleasing. So I found that just posting pictures in my living room tend to have a little bit more of like an Instagram feel to them, and I actually really enjoy the way those ones turn out more than having just a super plain background. Again, if you're posting for Poshmark, it's not going to matter too much, but if you're doing if you're selling on eBay, you're going to want a white background. My biggest advice is make places like Joann Fabrics and the craft stores, Michael's, and all those places your best friend, because that's where you're going to find the most creative ways to kind of make your own backdrop without having to spend a ton of money. So that's pretty much it that I've used for my photo setup. I really enjoy the photo taking part of my Poshmark closet, so that's what I tend to invest the most time and money into perfecting it, and I always feel like there's room for making it better. I have gone from having a really bootstrap type of photo setup to a really not bootstrap to a really like bootstrap type of photo setup to like a super professional one using like all the best equipment or whatever. And now I've kind of found that it's somewhere in between, that you don't really need the best equipment to have good photos. You just need to know how to use your equipment in the best way, and you need to just continuously kind of learn and tweak. And yeah, so that's my video on all of the camera equipment that I use for Poshmark and taking my videos. I use all the same equipment basically. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Bye!